Part two of our series on boosting immunity through nutrition. Today we're going to be looking at avoiding energy draining foods and toxicity. In the last part we looked at introducing nutritionally dense foods into our diet. So I recommend you watch that if you haven't seen it already, and then you can move on to this, which is part two. So let's jump straight into it. This is everything we're going to talk about on the slide today. So first of all, we're going to discuss our six devils, right? The six levatized devils, which are vegetable oils, white flour, sugar, commercial soy, commercial milk, and table salt. If you look at most processed, packaged foods, they'll generally contain, all or most of these ingredients. And if you remove these ingredients, there's literally nothing left apart from artificial preservatives and flavorings, which are not exactly ideal anyway. So we're going to look at how these six devils affect your immune system specifically, and we're going to start off with the vegetable oils. So what am I talking about? So vegetable oils or vegetable seed oils, really, I'm talking about things like canola and sunflower and safflower oil. These are fat that they've managed to extract from a seed, and it's a very, very difficult process to do that. Let's have a look at this video here on YouTube. It's called canola oil, how it's made. And we can play this video. And I'm not going to play the whole video. You can watch it yourself, and I'll include the link at the bottom. But you can just sort of jump to any kind of point in this video, and it just kind of gets more and more kind of gross as you go through. Let's get to some of this. I mean, maybe I won't play it, 'cause I don't know. Yeah, this is the sort of the cake that comes out. It looks pretty gross, and then they kind of wash it in with some sort of hexane or bleach. Store them in these vats. It looks more like a sort of toxic chemical factory. And then here's the oil on the way being processed here. Okay, that's absolutely interesting. And then yeah, look at this sludge coming off here. Just, to me, it's just shocking how horrible the whole thing is. It's obviously an incredibly unnatural product. And if you take these oils, these canola oils, sunflower oils, and look at them under a microscope, molecularly, they look more similar to plastic than they do to real food. If you think about how important fat is in the diet, if we are preferentially getting fat from these oils rather than from natural sources such as sort of avocados or coconuts or fatty cuts of meat and fatty fish and things like that, we're going to be making our bodies out of our fat. And what in particular, which parts of our body in particular uses a lot of fat? Well, our brain, for example, is 60% fat once you've moved the water. Our cells, there's over 1 trillion cells in the body, and each cell has a cell membrane, the wall of the cell, and that cell membrane is made out of fat and cholesterol. So if you have a cell made out of poor quality fat, it makes it very hard for the nutrients to get in and very hard for the waste to get out of the cell, and that causes sort of DNA damage, inflammation, and potentially cell mutation and other more serious problems, if you're familiar with what happens when a collection of cells get together and become mutated and can't respirate properly. Our central nervous system, which includes our brain and nerves down our spinal column, so each nerve is surrounded by a myelin sheath, which is made out of fat. And then also our hormones, which are made out of fat and cholesterol. So if we're now taking these essential functions in our body and making them out of vegetables, we're really doing ourselves no favors at all. And this is going to have disastrous consequences on our immune system, which is going to be going around trying to sort out all these problems as opposed to fighting off things like coronaviruses as and when they pop up. So we've got vegetable oils at the number one of our hit list. Number two on the list is white flour. So white flour, which is basically refined white wheat flour, contains a lot of anti-nutrients such as gluten, gliadin, lectins, and phytates. And these anti-nutrients can be quite irritable to some. They can be seriously problematic to others, and for others, they cause things like celiac disease, which is a very, very serious allergy to wheat and its and gluten, particularly in wheat. White flour is largely devoid of good quality nutrients, and those which are mainly found in the bran, which has been stripped away. It's not a particularly good product, even if it didn't have all the anti-nutrients. The main problem is that most people have some sort of allergy or intolerance to wheat flour, and if you have an intolerance to flour or wheat and gluten, this is going to inflame your immune system every time you consume it. Now, as we mentioned on part one, your gastrointestinal tract, which runs from mouth to bottom, is anywhere between 21 and 42 feet long. Let's say an average of 30 feet long per person. That's a lot of tubing. And a lot of that tubing houses your immune system, because your immune system is separating the food which is technically outside your body when it's in your GI tract from the food before it goes into your body. So it's there to kind of prevent bad things from getting inside your body. So if your immune system is continually fighting off all the anti-nutrients in white flour, how can it have any energy left to fight off viruses and flus and colds? So this is often why when people remove wheat flour and gluten containing foods, that would be like rye and barley, and from their diet, they feel absolutely fantastic, because their immune system can now start going around and mopping up other things that are going on. So this can be more problematic for some people than others, but on the whole, it's completely unnecessary in the diet, and unless you are starving, I would recommend removing it, particularly if you want to boost your immune system. I talk a lot more about that here on this article, a lot more eloquently than I did today, on all the fuss about what's all the fuss about gluten in Singapore. So there's tons and tons and tons of articles in here, and scientific reference at the bottom there. Okay, so next one, sugar. So sugar is a neurotoxin, insofar it's a toxin to the brain. Sugar doesn't contain any nutrients whatsoever. If you remember Chronometer, we were looking at that the other day. I'll just bring it up. I've got 100 grams of white sugar selected here. Let's have a look what's in it. There we go. It's got no amino acids, no vitamins. I'm just going to make myself a bit smaller. And it's got no minerals. So it's literally completely devoid of any synergistic vitamins and minerals that are necessary to help digest sugar. So without those, sugar just excites the immune system, becomes a toxin that the body needs to get rid of. I added a little bit. This is just a Facebook post we posted a while ago when we talked about white sugar, and I've highlighted it here when I said, when you consume sugar as a part of real food like fruit, you are not just ingesting sugar and water, but also vitamins, minerals, and polyphenols, along with synergistic components such as mineral activators, enzymes, coenzymes, co-vitamins, helpers, and fiber. So this is when it's a real food, then it becomes easy to digest. But on its own, it's just toxic garbage, and it's just going to send your central nervous system. It's going to activate your CNS, activate your sympathetic nervous system, your flight or fight nervous system, which is going to turn off your immune system and be very, very problematic. So, to me, sugar, like tobacco, it surely can be only a matter of time before they start taxing this stuff and putting warning labels on it. But considering it, the first doctor said that smoking was bad for you back in in the First World War, back in 1912. It took sort of decades and decades before smoking was finally labeled as the villain it was. I think it could take a long time for sugar. But in the meantime, and before the advice catches up, I would just remove it from your diet. I've got some more interesting things on here on sugar, where medical research shows that processed sugar lowers the body's ability to control and heal diseases such as diabetes, hypoglycemia, cancer, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. So really, sugar should be avoided if we're looking to boost our immunity. Number 4 on here, commercial GMO, genetically modified organisms, commercial soy. As we discussed in part 1, soy can be rather beneficial if it's organic and activated, soaked, sprouted, and fermented in the form of things like natto, tempeh, oncom, miso. It becomes quite a good quality product, good quality food. But if you're drinking a lot of soybean milk, or you're eating a lot of cheap tofu, or you're consuming a lot of whey protein shakes made from soy, or generally just consuming a lot of packaged and commercial soy in your diet, then I would definitely recommend removing it completely. It's going to be inflammatory, and any kind of inflammatory response means your immune system's going to be dealing with that rather than what you want it to be dealing with, which is any viruses turning up. If you just have a bit of tofu here and then, I wouldn't worry about it, not a big deal. But for somebody that's regularly consuming cheap soy, that's something you should be focusing on. Commercial milk. Milk, again, milk is a kind of like a soy. It can be, good quality milk from well looked after animals that is organic, unhomogenized, unpasteurized, from cows or goats that have fed grass their whole life and consumed by someone that is not lactose intolerant. It can be really good quality food. But for many people, particularly in Singapore, there's a huge amount of lactose intolerance. In fact, we look at this study here, which I originally found on the MOH, the Singapore Ministry of Health website, where they talk about, here it is, 95% of Singapore Chinese, out of the ones they studied 73 out of 77, they found were lactose intolerant. So if that is a proxy for the entire population, that means 95% of Singapore Chinese, which is about 80% of the entire population of Singapore, is lactose intolerant. So if you're consuming something that you're intolerant to, again, that's going to be inflammatory. It's going to cause an immune response, which means your immune system's going to be overworked, and it's not going to be spending time on what it should be doing, which is focusing on incoming viruses and unexpected situations. So we definitely recommend removing milk from your diet if you suspect at all that you might be lactose intolerant or intolerant to milk. There's one tab here. I'm going to go back to sugar again because there's one tab which I didn't explain. This is a great video by Dr. Robert Lustig, who talks about sugar and fructose, which is mentioned here. Chronic fructose exposure, which is mentioned in the top right of the video, is one of the components of white sugar. This video has been viewed 10 million times on YouTube. What he's done is he's listed out the problems on the left-hand side of chronic ethanol exposure, and he's compared it with chronic fructose or chronic sugar exposure. And as you can see, much of the diseases that are related to drinking too much alcohol is exactly the same as eating too much sugar in your diet. So that's very, very interesting to me. And this was a fascinating video I saw. I highly recommend that. I'll include a link to that as well. Let's go back to our presentation. Last one, table salt. Yeah, table salt is probably the least of our concerns. I mean, certainly if you're eating regularly at the Hawker Center and you're not eating anywhere else, you are going to incur a massive sodium chloride electrolyte imbalance, i.e. you're going to have more sodium chloride than any other electrolytes such as potassium. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. If you're just eating once in a while, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Always make sure that you consume plenty of potassium in your diet, because we're generally never going to have too much. Generally, never going to have too much potassium, too little sodium. It's always the other way around. However, if you do sweat a lot, like you're walking around in the sun a lot, or you're exercising or using saunas, then it's not such a big deal, because your body sweats out what it doesn't need. So if you have excess sodium and you have a sodium potassium in your balance, your body will preferentially sweat out the sodium rather than the potassium. However, you do need to make sure there's more coming in again. So if you are sweating a lot, of course, you need to be replenishing with electrolytes and good quality water. So that's the 6 devils. Now going to wrap up and special attention on these last few here. Caffeine, booze, the dirty dozen, and foods regularly consumed. So caffeine, when you have a shot of coffee, you feel awake, you feel good. What's happening is the caffeine is stimulating your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are 2 walnut-sized glands which secrete hormones. They sit above your kidneys in your lower back. They release adrenaline, which I'm sure you've heard of, and cortisol. One of the side effects of cortisol being released is that your immune system is down-regulated, and we can go into details of that another time. But so drinking a lot of caffeine is going to down-regulate your immune system. Alcohol, of course, is a poison, which is very demanding on the immune system. So that goes without saying. If you're looking to boost your immune system, you shouldn't be drinking. The dirty dozen, those are 12 foods which are absolutely laced with pesticides and chemical fertilizers and all sorts of nasties like that. These days, you can't wash that stuff off. You can't stick it under the tap and wash it off. Modern insecticides and rodenticides and fungicides, they're systemic. They're embedded in the central nervous system of the plant. So, washing it off is totally pointless. You have to not consume it at all and switch to organic foods. If I switch over to here, this is part 2 of Is Organic Food Really Worth It? And here we've got the dirty dozen there, so it should sort of leafy green vegetables and commonly consumed fruits and veggies. Yeah, and the other thing is foods regularly consumed. So if you're consuming sort of white rice 3 times a day, you're going to, from the same farm, in Thailand, for example, or Indonesia, you're going to be consuming the same pesticides, the same chemical fertilizers, the same fungicides, the same rodenticides, insecticides, etc. every time you consume those foods, and that's going to really turn your immune system on. So it makes sense that if you are consuming a particular type of food a lot, to switch to organic. Rice would be the most sensible thing, because it's pretty, you can get I don't know how much kilogram of cheap rice, maybe it's a few $4 or $5, and for just a couple of dollars more, you could upgrade that to organic rice, and you're going to get far more nutrients in that rice, as we've discussed in the previous section, and you're going to get far more nutrients and far less chemical nasties. So it's just really a no-brainer for a few more dollars. And of course, you won't need to eat as much to be micronutriently satisfied. Okay, so that's it for avoiding energy-draining foods. Part 3, we're going to be looking at primary pattern diet typing and why that is essential for boosting your immune system. Thanks very much for listening. Cheers. Bye-bye.